So watching Business Nigeria, coming to you live from our studios here. Let's get into our second conversation now. Amid inflationary pressure and economic headwinds, KPMG Nigeria projects that the current inflationary pressure in Nigeria will persist till the end of 2023. In its November report on macroeconomics review for the first half and the outlook for the second half of the year 2023, the multinational firm projected that the headline inflation will rise to about 30% by December this year. Specifically, it says headline and food inflation are unlikely to ease as soon as the depreciation of the naira continues to reinforce the inflationary impact of fuel subsidy removal via higher input prices and production cost cursed by imported inflation. Yeah, for more insight now, the president of the Association of Corporate Treasurers of Nigeria, Mr. Inka Ogunobi, joins me virtually. Thank you, Mr. Ogunobi, for joining us. I appreciate your time. Ahead of inflation data, of course, which is expected tomorrow. Yes, thank you. So KPMG is projecting inflation rate to hit about 30% by year end. What is the implication of these?
Thank you. I think the implication is only a reflection of where we see monetary policy going. I'm pretty sure that many people will be looking at and thinking, okay, should we be looking at the inflation rate, going down? But the reality is that given the cost push inflation that we've had over the last couple of months, the trend line is only going to go up before it comes down. So there are lots of things that the monetary authorities are doing to fight this, to make it come down. But it's likely that within the short term, it's still going to go up before it comes down. And then when you also add some of the challenges with food inflation, the floodings, challenges with long rainy season and that, you just begin to see why the projections of KPMG that the rates will reach 30%. And finally, also when you also look at what is happening with Egypt and Ghana, interest rates are well above the 38%. Inflation rate is well above the 30%. You'll understand why that projection is there.
Well, I mean, let's talk about the impact of these on Nigerian households and businesses. I know that CBN has been trying to control or mitigate, the rise in inflation rate by sometimes they use the monetary policy rate by, reviewing it either upward or perhaps leaving it moderately. But let's talk about the impact this will have. Should the inflation hit about 30% by December, as projected by this multinational firm?
Yeah, thanks. I think you hit the right point. I would say that the Nigerian household and also the corporate institutions have already been hit severely by this CPI. When you look at where food inflation is today, food inflation is over 30% already. Okay, so we're already over 30% when it comes to things that impact the household. So I'll be more interested in seeing what food inflation looks like, and then I judge how that will impact food prices, going forward, because there's a bit of a bright light in the October, in the September report, where we found out that the rate of increase of food inflation in September was a bit lower than the rate of increase in August. So, but the reality is this: if we're going to reduce inflation at any point in time, the government needs to look at how to reduce food inflation. You only need to look at, the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics. They usually do a publication every month of food prices. So you only need to look at the change in food prices from 2022 to 2023, and then you see that the changes have been so significant that if we don't do everything we can to bring that down, we will not be able to get inflation under control. Now, going to what the CBN has been doing. Now, over time, the CBN has been using one of its tools, mainly the MPR tool, to control inflation. But quite clearly, it has not worked. It really has not worked because every time they do that, the rates are going up. And I think it's because they are approaching it from a very, not, I want to say wrong perspective, but they're not hitting it where it really, really matters. Which is why looking at the current CBN administration, its approach using the open market operation seem to align with what a lot of industry experts expect, that instead of just hiking MPR rates, when you use some of these tools, the open market operations, I think they did about 400 billion. It might have the same impact of tightening liquidity, reducing the supply of naira, and then let's see the impact that has. I have a feeling that they might combine the two. Both the open market operations and increasing the NPR. But it remains to see the impact this will have. But to put it, plainly, to reduce our inflation, we must attack food inflation. We must go to the route. One easy way of looking at it, I would call it the cheat code, is to, change the food basket. But that won't help. The important thing to do is to look at how do you reduce food prices, how do you reduce the cost of food, and if we can do that significantly, it will bring down the inflation rate.
Okay, let's look at key factors contributing to the persistent inflationary pressure in Nigeria. I mean, the influence of fuel subsidy removal and FX unification are said to be factors that might be the major, cost factors for inflation. I mean, how well do you think the fiscal authorities and the monetary authorities are taking the bull by horn to address this?
I think they are doing a lot. To be honest with you, it's not a very easy thing to do. I mean, you're going to have to choose one. Okay, you choose to fight inflation, or you choose to manage currency. At some point, you're going to have to focus on one and try to get one under control while you're also trying to manage the others. The interesting thing is that these two factors impact inflation. In this case, we talk about imported inflation. And so when you remove subsidy on one hand, and you inject the higher cost of energy into production, into every other thing, into transportation and the well-being of people, it will have this spill effect, which ultimately we see in higher cost prices. So, but it is also it's a very difficult situation for the monetary authorities, and they have to look at it and take a very strong action. And from what we have seen so far in some of the bold moves that they are making, it's only going to be a question of when this will start to have impact, and not if it will have it will have impact. On the side of the corporate, I would say that they are being hit on both sides. And so whether you're looking at it from the point of view of devaluation of the currency, they are impacted significantly. Cost of production is impacted because you're going to have to import at a particular rate and pay at another rate. So they are impacted significantly by devaluation. They are also impacted by the challenges, solutions that the CBN has put in place, which is increasing NPR. So you increase NPR, and then, or use this open market operations The impact of that is that it increases cost of borrowing, because the whole idea of increasing cost of borrowing is to discourage people borrowing cheaper with naira to go and buy FX and then apply pressure on FX. So essentially, what we're also impacted on is that it becomes more expensive to borrow, and so that cost of finance is also put into the bottom line, and and then the cost of goods and services as it comes to the average Nigerian is very, very high. But like I said, they're going to have to focus on one, and I think right now that they are focusing on inflation and also at the same time trying to manage the currency at the same time.
Okay. I mean, let's talk about the Nigerian GDP, Nigerian economy. Nigerian economy has been projected as well to grow by 2.6% in 2023, and this is lower than both the revised World Bank's 2023 forecast of 2.8% and the 3.1% growth rate achieved in 2022. And this is because inflation has been seen as a clog in the wheel of growth for the economy. So what's your outlook on this projection?
I think I would be more conservative, in terms of where we should be in terms of GDP. I think that where we should be is where the current administration, the current president, projected in his campaign documents, where he was looking at somewhere in double figures growth, because that's where it will really impact Nigerians. I mean, if we grow at 10% plus, Nigerians will feel it. But if we keep growing at 2.5, that's where we are right now currently. It's not going. Nobody will feel it. You won't really feel it. But the reality is this: you cannot grow at very high levels with high interest rates that you are dealing with and high inflation rates. You're going to have to pick one, to be able to say, okay, how do we deal with this short-term issue to give us the capacity to grow? So that projection, although, to be very, fair to Nigerians, it's not going to show in the households, in 2024. You will not necessarily feel it. However, it is a very conservative projection that if we can at least maintain growth that is higher than our growth rate, okay, and even if it's a marginal level, it gives us, a platform to be able to build on. And if we can do that, manage inflation, bring it down to maybe not single digits, but lower double digits, and also stabilize the currency, it gives us a platform to then grow. And then maybe in 2025, we begin to look at growing at higher volumes and higher rates and higher levels, maybe towards the projection of the current administration.
All right. Well said. Well, let's talk about stability and sustainability of the economy, which, of course, these two keys are very, very germane and crucial to growth. So what specific policies would you want to see the government implemented to boost productivity, beside current interventions and ongoing reforms in the economy?
Very good question. So there's an approach that I see coming from the previous administration, which was more import substitution led. So the idea, you will see through some of the policies like suspending some items from the valid for FX window, shorting the borders at some point. Some of the policies were more geared towards import substitution. And that's good to a large extent. The challenge you have is that you have a very young population, Over 60% of Nigeria's population is below 24. And so the reality is that this population will keep consuming. There's nothing you can do about it, but they will keep consuming. And the things they will consume are likely the things that you need to import. So the approach, which I see a lot, is the approach of okay, let's do import substitution. So that's fine. That might deal with that, but you still have a problem of a population that is, ferociously consuming. And so I think that a proper policy, which might take a bit of time, is not just import substitution, is actually growing in terms of local production capacity to export. So we have to be able to not just substitute what we import to supply the local economy, but we have to be able to grow enough to be able to produce for the world. And so my own position is that the policies that we must see going forward must be policies that are not necessarily geared towards, okay, let's reduce importation. I very much doubt with the way our population is that we will reduce that. But let's look at policies that create local production that we can supply the world. And so when your exports exceed your imports to a large extent, and your balance of trade is so much in your favor, then that's a better way, of looking at it, of having a very sustainable economy that will last the time, instead of running against all the time. Because if you're doing import substitution, what you're doing is that you're just running, you're reacting, you're running against the tide, running against the tide. Maybe the approach is, okay, fine, let's look at what we can produce locally and to supply the world, earn foreign exchange in the process, and improve our balance of trade.
Okay. I mean, we've talked so much about the role of fiscal and monetary policy coordination play in addressing the interconnected challenges of inflation. You talk about economic growth and exchange rate stability. So how effective is the coordination between the two authorities, talking about the fiscal and monetary authorities?
How effective is in the current climate, or in the previous climate, or in total, in general?
Hello, Mr. Agubi.
I was trying to clarify.
Hello, Mr. Agubi, can you hear me? Okay, please go ahead.
Yes, I was asking a question that is it how effective in the current climate or in the previous climate?
No, I was asking you how crucial is the relationship between the fiscal authority and the monetary authority in tackling inflation, and maybe in the foreign exchange market.
It's absolutely crucial. Absolutely crucial. What we have today is a huge disconnect between monetary policy and fiscal policy, and I'm not blaming the current government for that. I mean, if that's the structure they inherited, then that's what they have to deal with. But there's a huge disconnect between monetary policy and fiscal policy. In the previous central bank, we found the central bank leaving monetary policy, or let's say adding fiscal policy to its own monetary policy by doing intervention for agriculture or some other things like that. What we see with the current CBN is that they're trying to separate that to say, okay, we'll focus only on monetary policy. But it is essential, it's very, very essential that whatever fiscal policy, whatever monetary policy that CBN is projecting, the fiscal policy also supports it. And one of the easy examples that I give is that you cannot be saying in one breath that Nigerians should accept and absolve the sacrifices that comes with reforms, like the reforms that comes from oil subsidy, removing oil subsidies, the reform that comes from liberalizing the FX market, and all that, and then the government is spending as if there's no tomorrow. It doesn't make sense, especially when those expenses are actually imported items. So monetary policy must match fiscal policy, and when that is in place, it makes for a more coherent economic policy and reform.
I think we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much, President, Association of Corporate Treasurers of Nigeria, Mr. Yinka Ogunube. Thank you for coming on Business in Nigeria. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me.